Go into our regularly scheduled work session. It is a joint work session. I don't know if we have any representatives. Is this with the Planning Commission as well, Nicole?
No, this is just your regular work
Okay.
session.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Christine, I'll ask you the same questions. Do we have any public comments for our, our work session this evening?
Yeah. First.
I need to get over here, right?
Thank you, Christine. Appreciate that. Okay, it looks like we have 3 people this evening, and our first speaker will be Mike. Mike, please come up to the podium and let us know where you reside. And I know you know this drill well. You will have 3 minutes in which to share your comments with us this evening.
Sounds good. Mike Powder reside in Empire. I still reside up there as far as I know. And tonight I don't have too much on because I didn't have too many notes, but I did get out on my bike for the Blackberry Festival. Had a great time, and then I rode around and enjoyed it. And one thing I haven't done for a long time is I went along the boardwalk. Now it's murder to get a bike on that boardwalk. You know, go across the traffic lights, get on there. So I've done that in the past. This time I decided the traffic was really good, so I went out on the road on 101. There wasn't much traffic around, and I took up the lane, and I had a nice peaceful drive. I owned the road until I got up. Then I got on that lousy bit of gravel, you know, at the end of the track there, and followed it all the way along. And it really is, it's beautiful. But you see that railroad track, and that railroad track would be an asset for this city. It's becoming like an abandoned railroad track, you know. And as it went down there, they've still got the signs that say, when you get to the end of it, signs that say, you know, stay away. Pinkerton security will throw you in jail or whatever they'll do to you. But anyway, I went across it and had a good run. But anyway, hopefully we can work something out with the railroad where we can do something with all that track that takes up all our waterfront. And the railroad pretty much keep anybody from dangling their toes in the water. So I'm not a big fan of the railroad, and I love trains. The other thing on my bike when I'm around is, of course, one thing to me is speed limits in town. I think the city should have a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. But one area I really noted that I think needs a great bit of attention is Woodland Drive. We all know Woodland Drive that leads on into Broadway and there. When you pull off Ocean Boulevard, there's a sign that says 25. That's terrific because Woodland Drive has no sidewalks. Has no sidewalks, no bike lanes. You go a little further along, it has a nice, beautiful center turn lane, which sometimes goes into the woods or whatever it goes into. And then it hits 35 miles an hour. And that road should not be 35 miles an hour, in my opinion, because if you're on a bike, you've got to be in the road, and you often see people walking in the road because, like I say, there are no sidewalks at all. And there are a lot of houses on that road. It's sort of a funny road because it's like it's a part of a suburb that became an arterial, but it's like a minor arterial, but it's a busy road. So that's about it for me tonight. Thank you, folks.
Mike, just as a reminder, I think you know this, the railroad is actually owned by the port. So that might be a comment you want to share at an upcoming port meeting.
Sure,
Okay,
will be good.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. This evening is Dean Lundy.
Hi, Commissioners, Mr. Mayor. First, I wanted to thank Ms. Schnabel for recommending a moratorium on storage units. I have found that when the economy goes to heck, people lose their rentals, they lose their houses, and they have to store their stuff in these storage units. They don't help the community at all. And Commissioner Crivens, I'm all about that. You know, the subject I put down on the public comments was pie in the sky. Last week, we went to the casino there and listened to the promotion for the ship to rail thing that may or may not happen. And if it does happen, the minimum is going to be 10 years. It probably take 20 years. And all the local people that we talked to at that meeting and at the meeting that later that day in Charleston, they were all saying that the port doesn't support any of the local businesses. They're all waiting for this huge pie in the sky. That's what everybody called it. We're looking at, excuse me, increasing the urban growth boundary. There's a shipyard in Charleston. Everybody, the restaurants out there are just ghetto. The shipyard has no showers, no nothing. I'm kind of wanting to see somebody pick up the ball for the local small businesses, bike shops and, restaurants. And especially we have to keep that boatyard, the shipyard there. That guy, Ray Cox, has been asking everybody, we need help out there. And the port isn't helping them. And they hired their old rent-a-cop as the harbor master, and everybody hates him and he hates everybody, and there's no communication there. So I'm hoping that we can promote the urban growth boundary around there and maybe push the city toward, or the port or the rail, whoever it is, to look into the Charleston area and make sure that shipyard stays alive. Because if that fails, that Charleston's a gem, I think. But the restaurants are ugly. The boatyard, like I say, boatyards and yacht clubs, they should be really fancy and nice. And you should be able to work on your boat and take a shower at the end of the day. Anyway, thank you.
The next person on the list to comment this evening is Dylan Brainerd. Is that right? Yeah. Come on up. Dylan, you'll have 3 minutes, and we ask that you introduce yourself and tell us what city you reside in.
I reside in Barview area. My name's Dylan Brainerd, and I'm a member of the Confederated Tribes. I also work for Consolidated Electrical Distributors. I also own a company called Millick Energy, and I'm building another one for financing for some local banks. I'm going to be continued about that. All about economic development. That's why I'm here. I didn't realize that I was supposed to be giving a speech until they started talking. I honestly thought that was a check-in sheet, honestly. So a little nervous.
Well, Dylan,
but
you've introduced yourself to us.
yeah, but I just started this job about 8 months ago. Consolidated Electrical Distributors works and negotiates with manufacturers. So I believe that by attending some of these events, that I can help bring the manufacturers to you guys to help alleviate and offset some costs, whether it be engineering or anything in front ahead of the projects. So hopefully by working with some manufacturers that may deem themselves as more committed to this area and showing that, improving that may create stronger relationships for Coos Bay. And I've also been helping our fire department and police department. I've been giving y'all donuts for quite some time. Speaking of which, I did leave some donuts in there, by the way. Yeah, of course. But other than that, I am just here to listen and take notes, and that's about it. So thank you.
Dylan, how are you? Are you related to Chief Brainerd? Is that right?
Yes, actually, Warren. Yeah, so he's like my great uncle, and then Bill Brainerd, that's my great grandfather. So I look to hopefully not be as stubborn as my family, but walk in those kind of steps, and try to make some good progress here with the city of Coos Bay and Coos, Curry, and Douglas counties. So
I had the great pleasure of learning how to clam by your great grandfather, Bill Brainerd, in Charleston. And so I'm sure he'd be very proud of you this evening. So well done, you.
well, thank you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Dylan, do you have a business card to meet with
Oh.
staff?
Yeah. Do you want one right now? I'll go
Yeah,
get
you can just-
I got it. All right. I'll leave a couple for you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Any other
that
questions?
is the end of, Dylan, any other comments this evening?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Okay.
Well, that's all it. All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other public comments this evening? Christine, did you want to make a public comment?
No, I'm here for the second session, so.
We are in the second session, so this would be your opportunity if you want to make a public comment this evening.
And it's about your conversation.
It's about the Coos Bay Economic Development presentation that we'll be having shortly.
I thought it didn't start till 6:30.
We jumped the gun, Christine, and I just realized I probably broke rules, but the staff. was supposed to.
Okay.
So
All right.
comment related to the topic.
because we might want to get into the topic first. This is just general public comment.
Yeah, this is about your topic, so I didn't know how the rules are going to be for that.
So we'll wait for the presentation and then I will let you make comment. How's that?
Okay.
Is that better?
That sounds better because it's about that.
Okay, sounds great. And with that said, I think the work session was supposed to begin at 6:30. May I still proceed, Nicole, or should we pause and wait till 6:30?
Well, it was noticed
At 6:30?
so we may
Okay.
have some folks who are planning to attend at 6:30. We do have our consultants online already, but
So why don't we go ahead and take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back for our scheduled meeting at 6:30.
okay.
Being that it is 6:30, I'm going to bring us back together for the joint work session. We already had public comment, so I will move to the first agenda item, which is review of the upcoming city council and URA action items. And under that action item is the economic development analysis and strategic plan. That was hard to get out. Chelsea, I'm turning it over to you.
Good evening, council. As always, planning comes with long, verbose things. So as you're aware, staff has been working with Echo Northwest Consultant over the course of the last year to update the economic element of our comprehensive plan. Just brief background, Oregon statewide planning goals require cities to maintain a 20-year supply of commercial and industrial lands. The way we do this is by every 20 years or so completing an updated economic opportunities analysis. And so that's what we've been working on. The Ford Family Foundation awarded the city a grant in the amount of $50,000 to do this work, plus, in addition to the EOA, complete an economic development strategic plan, because that is really key to moving forward the recommended strategies and actions in the EOA forward so that we can actually see some progress. So we've done that. The consultant was here in April, presented to both Planning Commission and City Council. They're here tonight to present again on the draft final EOA and what we call an EDSP. So I believe, having said that, I will turn it over to them. We have Beth, Brittany, and Scott of Echo Northwest online to present, and they have a presentation.
I'm seeing hi all, a disabled participant screen sharing.
I'll set it so you can share, Scott.
Thank you. Are folks able to see that?
We sure are. Thank you, Scott.
Good. Let's see. Beth is on mute right now.
Yes, I was not meaning to be muted. Brittany, do you want me to kick us off or do you want to kick us off?
Go ahead, Beth.
Okay, so we're the team from Echo Northwest. I know you met Scott and Brittany last spring. You've only seen me here on Zoom. We have developed an economic opportunities analysis that I will talk about, and then an economic development strategic plan that I think Brittany will predominantly talk about. On the next slide, please. So your primary project products are the EOA document that will be for your comprehensive plan and support an update of your comprehensive plan. It's a technical document meant to meet the Goal 9 requirements. It also provides information that's very useful and helpful in the economic development strategic plan, which is a strategy to leverage the opportunities in the EOA into policy actions. And it's very implementation focused. And Brittany will be talking about that shortly. On the next slide. So we had about, well, exactly a year-long schedule here. And we're here at the very end of it. I think you've got draft documents and we will be talking over those with you this evening. In terms of engagement, We worked with a PAC meeting throughout the project and want to thank them for that. We did focus groups and a work session with your planning commission and your city council back in April. And then we had subsequent discussions with city councilors and planning commissioners who had follow-up questions for us on that. And here we are back with you this evening. So hopping on to the topic of the EOA. Cities do an EOA, as Chelsea said, to meet legal requirements. Oregon statewide planning goal 9 is economy. And the EOA is supposed to be updated periodically to help the city understand whether you have enough land to accommodate expected commercial and industrial growth. So that's the legal requirements. It's also very important information for understanding your existing conditions and forecasting future conditions that inform your economic development strategy, that can inform your land use policy, such as changing land from one zone to another, rezoning land. The EOA can be supporting in that, and help you with coordination about economic development, which is really where the interesting work in economic development, in my opinion, comes through all that coordination you have to do, which I know that Brittany and Scott will be talking about with the economic development strategy. We're planning here for long-term growth over the next 20 years. The economic development strategy focuses on a much shorter timeline and implementation focus in the next few years. So next slide, please. So the highest level results of the EOA. The city's forecast to grow by about 1,500 jobs by 2045. That's an optimistic forecast based on some of the information we've included in the EOA document, but specifically based in part on plans for port expansion and assuming that happens, and what may be some of the spin-off opportunities of that. In other words, that much growth that near to the edge of the city is going to result in additional employment growth in Coos Bay, as well as the surrounding areas. Your key opportunities are around manufacturing, very broadly speaking, looking at port-related industries and logistics, repair and maintenance of equipment, services for people who live in Coos Bay, as well as the surrounding area, and services for people who visit the region. We've incorporated feedback from the City Council about the timeliness of the employment data and verifying that we had the employment data that was specific to the city of Coos Bay, rather than looking more broadly at Coos County. Thinking about the buildable lands inventory, you've got about 31 acres of buildable industrial land. That's industrial land that does not have, that's not fully built out or has no development on it and has no constraints. And constraints includes things like steep slopes or floodplains. So this is land that is unconstrained. About 28 acres of buildable commercial land. Again, we incorporated feedback from the Planning Commission about new development and buildable constraints in the revision of the buildable lands inventory. So when we hop to the next slide, the end results of the EOA are that Coos Bay does not have enough land to meet its 20-year employment growth forecast, with a deficit of about 36 acres of industrial land and 30 acres of commercial land. And what you should do about that, I'll answer in the next slide. But before we go on to recommendations, are there any questions that you have about the high-level conclusions we've got here?
I think we're good. Thank you.
I just saw Joe come off of mute, so perhaps he has a question?
Yeah, did you consider the FEMA buy-up in your analysis?
We can't consider the FEMA buy-up in our analysis because new maps aren't, it's not adopted, new maps aren't available, that kind of thing. But we did assume that land that was in the floodplain would be unbuildable. So I'm not sure that unless you get new maps, I'm not sure that the FEMA buy-up is going to make a big difference. If you're not allowed to develop in floodplains anymore, well, we didn't consider that developable in the buildable lands inventory, even though we know that in reality, development does happen currently in the floodplains.
All right, thanks.
Certainly. Okay, then going on to the next slide. So our recommendations are update your economic element of the comprehensive plan, including your goals and policies, including adopting the EOA as a factual basis into your comprehensive plan. You can do that in a very simple way that I know Chelsea is familiar with. We'll talk about the economic development strategic plan, but implementing that's going to be an important thing to taking advantage of the opportunities in Coos Bay, especially if the port project takes a little while to happen, as I was listening to comments earlier, and there's some concerns about that. And certainly I understand why, but implementing that economic development strategic plan is going to be an important piece. Aligning the city's goals for economic development for planning for infrastructure development. I also heard discussion, not surprisingly enough, earlier about the city's tight financial position. And so as you're doing infrastructure development, thinking about how it can support economic development as well as opportunities to support other types of necessary development. Determining whether and how to address your deficit of industrial land, as well as your industrial commercial land deficit. You're not required by the state to expand your urban growth boundary for this industrial or commercial land deficit. This is very different than when you've got a housing land deficit. The city gets to decide if it's going to do that. Should you choose to look at an expansion of the buildable lands inventory, choose whether it makes sense to do that for industrial in the context of any other urban growth boundary expansion you may be doing. If you're doing a housing urban growth boundary expansion, I'd really seriously consider opportunities for inclusion of some commercial land where you'd be having, where you'd have new housing land. That way you can provide a small bit of local commercial opportunities. Also consider the opportunities for redevelopment of commercial land. So one of the considerations in expanding your UGB for commercial land, so what's that going to do to your underperforming existing commercial areas? Are there opportunities for redeveloping those areas to support more intensive uses in places like downtown? Plan for needs related to the Coos Bay port expansion. And then monitor and replenish your supply of commercial and industrial land on a regular and periodic basis. You can do that starting with your buildable lands inventory and looking at larger developments and sort of taking land off your list of land that is potentially developable. At some point, you'll want to do another economic opportunities analysis and determine whether at that point conditions have changed particularly and you have enough land or you have a continued need for a UGB expansion. So that is what I have. I guess I got one more slide on next steps on the EOA, making your comprehensive plan, text amendments, and adoption. I believe, Chelsea, that is something, I don't know if you want to say anything about that right now.
I'll just say that staff is prepared to walk that formal legislative amendment process to officially adopt the EOA and update our comprehensive plan. So that would be forthcoming.
Now I'm going to hand it over to Brittany unless there are any questions or comments.
I have one more. Can annexation be considered as an extension or, to expand our commercial areas or industrial areas?
If you've got land in the UGB, certainly that's zoned for commercial, and it's not annexed into the city, you can certainly do that. That land is counted in your buildable lands inventory if it's vacant or partially vacant and unconstrained. I'm not sure that I answered your question though, Joe.
Kind of. It's good enough though. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess
there's some possibilities. I mean, there's always a possibility of annexation, and I think that's an opportunity that the city of Coos Bay might have. I'm not saying it's something that we do have or will do, but I think it's an opportunity that has presented itself at certain times. So I just was wondering if we could annex it in. In fact, it's not even in the city limits, the part I'm talking about. So anyway.
I think I'm handing it over to Scott at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. Hi, everyone. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Economic Development Strategic Plan. I'll get us started off and then hand things over to Brittany to talk about some of the specific actions that we have in there. So first of all, thank you everyone in the room for your work and also those that are not in the room for your work. This was a collaborative process. A reminder that the Economic Development Strategic Plan is not being adopted today. I believe that's slated for the September 2nd meeting that you all have scheduled. And then another reminder that this Economic Development Strategic Plan is different from the City Council's strategic plan, but it should be complementary. And we tried to reference overlapping goals such as Focus Area 2 economic development whenever possible. So looking at the strategic clarity of this, I'll start out with existing conditions and some of the key takeaways that we'd shared before, but just to mention again, so we're all on the same page here. As we were looking at the data, Coos Bay has lower incomes compared to the state. A couple different ways of looking at that. There are fewer Coos Bay residents that earn over $100,000 a year and more residents that earn less than $20,000 a year than the state average. This can make it hard to buy a house, get a small business loan. Oftentimes a house is needed as collateral in order to get a small business loan. So the lower incomes have knock-on effects. Coos Bay has an older population compared with the state. The median age in Coos Bay is 3 years older than the rest of the state. And when you look at it for the county, that's 8 years older at the county level compared to the state. And this has impacts on workforce availability, as well as the types and level of medical care needed for the Coos Bay population. We saw that the Latino population is growing in Coos Bay, but that the BIPOC population overall is declining. This tracks with what we see as statewide trends. And then we found lower levels of educational attainment. So for Coos Bay residents over the age of 25, nearly half have only a high school diploma or less, compared to 31% for Oregon. And on the flip side of that, while 35% of the state has a bachelor's degree or higher, only 20% in Coos Bay do. So some of the other things that we'd also looked at, depending on the year that you compare it to, population is either remaining flat or maybe declining. The number of small businesses, that's businesses with 30 or less employees, has remained steady over the last 20-ish years. And then for business sectors with high employment concentration in Coos Bay when compared to the state, so a high location quotient, what does Coos Bay have a lot of? Those sectors were administration and support and waste management, healthcare and social assistance, which we know is at risk right now with some of the hospital challenges, utilities, and retail trade are the sectors with high concentrations of employment compared to the state. In addition to the hospital challenges, we know about housing affordability is a major challenge. We know the port expansion is a big X factor, and all of this is laid out with additional detail in the Economic Development Strategic Plan document that we shared with you. So all of this data is extremely important, but it doesn't give the whole picture of Coos Bay. I like to share, I grew up in Coos Bay. I went to Milner Crest, then Sunset Middle School, then Marshfield High School. And then I went to the University of Oregon Honors College and came back and did some substitute teaching in Coos Bay. So I am very familiar with the area. I care about it a lot. And I know that there is more to the community than some of these numbers alone imply. And so when we were meeting with people, something that came up again and again in our conversations is what a wonderful place Coos Bay is to live, and the stories of how much people work together and help one another. This is something that is imperative, in my opinion, that needs to shine through in not only this Economic Development Strategic Plan, but all of the work that is being done. So while there's some statistics that say one thing, we know that's not the whole story for Coos Bay. Coos Bay has a lot of smart people. There's something about living there that is special. I have a personal theory that it's got a little bit to do with the rainy winters and the rainy fall and the rainy spring and sometimes the rainy summers. And that's something that as we can get through those sorts of things, it makes us a more resilient population. We have to be clever about how we get through that. And there's a deep appreciation that goes with the land in the area. And so I bring that up as something that We heard different stakeholders talking about what a wonderful place it is, and that ability to work together and collaborate is, I think, what one of the key assets is to the Coos Bay community. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that we looked into the data. That's what we specialize in, but we also had qualitative conversations to flesh out the story in between those numbers. And then with all that, we posed the question, what is the long-term economic vision for Coos Bay? It's not going to be the city that it once was. There's not going to be a timber boom with seemingly infinite jobs for anyone that wants one. So now, how does Coos Bay adapt to today's and the next wave of economic opportunities? To tackle that question, we broke this plan into 4 primary economic goals and what needs to be addressed in the next 5 years. We broke each goal out into actions that will get to your goals. That's going to include things like initiatives, investments, projects, collaboration, media campaigns, all sorts of things, which you will find in more detail in Appendix F. And then what are the metrics to measure success? This is everything from year 1 at the startup all the way to year 5. So you can track progress, know if you're on the right path, and course correct as needed. Brittany will talk more about that. But what I want to say as well, that this is not meant to be a static document. It needs to adapt to your needs, to economic trade winds and opportunities, to changing staffing levels, which I know is something that we have to deal with, to funding levels, and then lastly, making sure it's adapting to your unique and specialized knowledge as a council who you've been elected to represent your community. And speaking of community, let's go over what helped to inform this. So this is a reminder of what engagement looked like. We shared this a bit. I'll talk about what we did and then the key insights that came from that. So from the get-go, as Beth mentioned, we had a project advisory committee, 4 meetings. That group was the driving force behind the strategic plan. Many people in this room were a part of that process. They got updates of the analysis as it evolved, requested changes to approaches, crafted the vision that we'll look at, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, the goals, the actions. And I want to make sure that I give a special plug to Lexi Woodward at the South Coast Development Council, who went above and beyond and was emailing, suggesting additions, changes throughout the entire process. She is doing incredible work, acting as one of those connector folks that I was talking about. And I want to be sure she gets a special thanks for all of her extra work and commitment to local economic development. We also had an online survey that had way more responses than we anticipated, over 180, which is great for a city the size of Coos Bay. Thank you, staff and partners, for helping to push the survey out to the community and get their feedback. And then we came down for a site visit on April 22nd and 23rd. Brittany and I, which was a chance to show off our area that I love, and we didn't get a tide pool or surf or mountain bike or sand dune or go blackberry picking or see a concert at the Marshfield Auditorium. And I'd just taken that time to plug Coos Bay a little bit. But we did get to have some great focus group conversations. We met a bunch of folks that support local businesses and the entire business ecosystem, such as yourselves, Bay Area Chamber of Commerce, Small Business Development Center, South Coast Development Council, realtors, developers, and the Visitor Center. So we did our engagement. Some of the key insights that came from those conversations that would otherwise not show up in data included things like perceptions of public safety and how that's affected business and real estate investment in the area. Several of the focus groups we talked with mentioned the few and loud online naysayers and the difficulties in combating those perceptions. These negative posts that I'm sure you all have seen, they resonate louder than the positive ones. We've included some actions to promote success stories in an effort to take back the narrative for Coos Bay. We also heard about an appreciation of city council and your how do we get to yes attitude. So kudos to you. Your work and insight is appreciated. That's not to say that there aren't also frustrations about certain aspects of the city, such as permitting processes, but in general, we heard an expression of confidence in this elected body. We also heard skepticism about a white knight employment opportunity. You all had mentioned this when we last presented in May about the port and then previously with LNG. And it is not to say that those aren't projects that shouldn't be supported, but to not depend on them either. There's a lot that's out of your control, and the idea being focused on what is in your control, which again takes me back to that earlier point that I want to emphasize about Coos Bay having smart people and knowing your community and how you can do things to improve the community. So with that background, will take us to the vision statement that the Project Advisory Committee crafted. By 2045, Coos Bay will be a thriving place where people of all ages choose to live, work, visit, and get involved. The city will support a diverse range of family wage jobs, while residents, visitors, and businesses will invest their time, talents, and resources to strengthen the local economy, foster an engaged and welcoming community, and create vibrant, shared public spaces. We'll next start looking at the actions and initiatives that will unfold over the course of 5 years, and those might change, but the intent here is that this vision statement is the North Star that should remain the same and should be what guides you in the direction of economic development. And then a quick overview of how we have the strategic framework set up. As I mentioned, you've got your goals that give your broad priorities that reflect community values, aligning with the comprehensive plan. There will be the actionable, discrete steps that the city and its partners can take, the timeline that starts out with a launch and setup in year 1, the year 2 through 4 is the deepening and scaling, and then finally in that year 5, evaluate, adapt, see what needs to change. We suggest metrics along the way of data points so that you can find out when you're on or off course. And then mentioning again how the city is strapped right now. And so we pointed out, here's where a city needs to be lead. Maybe here's where the city can be in a support role, or if you need to pull in a contractor support, or here's where you can have your partners stepping in to help out. So I'm going to hand it over to Brittany next, but I also want to make sure we have a moment. That was a lot to run through. If there's questions about those previous slides.
Any questions, counselors?
Not at this moment.
Okay, please proceed.
Great. Well, thank you, Scott, for that overview and introduction from Beth. And thank you, Council, for the opportunity to work on this project over the last year. It's been a really wonderful opportunity to get to know the community even better. And it's been, as you can imagine, a delight to work with Scott on this project. We don't often get a hometown hero on our team. So that's been a really fun element as well. So I think there's a different level of investment and from our team in this work. So it's been a pleasure. So I wanted to share an overview of some of the details in the strategy. And I know you were given a copy of the document in advance. And so if you had a chance to read it, wonderful. If not, I'll give an overview of these 4 goals and the actions within them, and then offer just a little bit more detail on one action per goal. So not go through all of them, but just share what level of detail you can expect. So for the first goal of it's strengthening and to strengthen and diversify the local economy. This is looking at a lot of business related goal actions. The second goal is to work on making the city a place where people want to invest and work in. So invest from a business and real estate perspective, and a place where talent want to be. The third goal is pointing to land use and infrastructure priorities and ensuring that infrastructure investments are in alignment with economic development target areas. And finally, goal 4 is all about the partnerships that make this work go round. We often talk about economic development as being a team sport. It's not anything one entity or one person can do on their own. And Coos Bay is fortunate to be in a region of some really active players. Scott mentioned Lexi earlier. There were several other folks on our advisory committee that really stepped up and are eager to support implementation of this work. So calling out how we can connect those dots. So we can go to the next slide, please, Scott. So for the first goal, strengthen and diversify the local economy, and these are the actions within it. And the first is around how to best retain and expand businesses. So working with the businesses that are already in Coos Bay. The second is around understanding how much city-owned and underutilized sites the city could be activating for economic development purposes. I'll go into that one in a little bit more detail in a moment. And the third is connecting the dots with our K-12 partners, as Scott mentioned, with some of the existing conditions and demographics, having lower educational attainment. So really bringing economic development to the table with education conversations. And the fourth is to develop target industry analyses. So leveraging, further leveraging the work that Beth did with the EOA, but looking at where the city can best thrive with specific industries. We heard from Dylan earlier from the manufacturing space, but specifically what types of manufacturing is Coos Bay best positioned to lead in. And then from there, how to promote competitive advantages. So promoting the city's workforce and infrastructure to support those target industries. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Scott. And this is a lot of text. I'll only share this amount of text once, but this is just a screenshot from the document to show the level of detail per action. So we really wanted to give staff enough information to really pick up this work and run with it. This falls short of what I would say is a work plan. It certainly isn't so descriptive that it's outlining an exact work plan, but explains the importance of each action, some next steps that staff or partners could take, what year we would recommend that this action begin, and how to measure success and what kind of partners should be involved. So for this action, as an illustrative example of inventorying sites around the city, it's really about how stakeholders and partners are really interested in the city taking a proactive role in shaping its future, and specifically in areas such as downtown, where there are sites that are available or might be in need of development. And so we heard this a lot through our focus groups. Again, not something that can come from the data, but from a lot of these conversations. But the first step is to really inventory how many sites the city has to be working with. A next step with this action would be to work with SEDC, and they have a regional database of employment sites. The city could do a call for properties to add even more sites, and then finally convene with developers to focus their marketing and promotional efforts on those targeted sites. So a way to measure this work would be to catalog the number of sites that are contributed to the regional database. And we see this as something the city can lead with potential contractor support if it gets to be a little bit more technical. But partners in this with this action would be certainly city staff, real estate brokers, developers in the community, and of course, partners like SCDC. So we have this as an illustrative example, but we can go on to the next goal. And this is around making the city a destination to both invest in and work in. And the first action here is pointing to some work from the council's strategic plan around a community-wide visioning process, a really comprehensive visioning process. So while we did a vision statement as part of this project, it was not, it did not involve a full community engagement process. And so we see it to be really important to engage the full community in crafting what forward-looking vision would look like, values and ambitions of the city. So that could look like economic development staff collaborating with all of you on council in your pursuit for this larger process, which may involve additional community meetings, more surveys and interviews. And this is something that could be, you could check in on and do an annual sentiment survey to see if the community is feeling brought along in that vision, and ensuring that feedback from those surveys are then brought into, are synthesized into council's priorities. We see this as something that could happen in year one of implementation and could be measured via those surveys that I spoke to. And this would involve a whole host of partners that we've listed in the strategy. We don't need to go into now, but this would be a pretty comprehensive action. The second action in this goal is to explore beautification efforts. So this is, again, something that came up from many of our conversations, specifically in targeted commercial and mixed use districts, and how to really consider the visual appeal of some of these properties. And the final action is around promoting success stories, and we have some next steps and ideas around that. This is what Scott was speaking to, that naysayers, the few naysayers are controlling the narrative, and there's just so much opportunity to share the good stories coming out of the city. So taking control of that. You can do the next slide, please. The third goal is to align land use and infrastructure with economic priorities. This is much more EOA heavy. The first action is around coordinating with the Housing Action Team to evaluate workforce housing needs and economic impacts. And while this work is already underway, housing came up in every single conversation we had. And so we'd be remiss if we did not include housing as an action. But what's different here is ensuring that there is economic development voices at the housing table, and ensuring that those teams are working really closely together. The second action here is to update zoning and permitting to streamline adaptive reuse. I'll detail this one a little bit more as an illustrative example. So the city has a mix of underutilized and occasionally vacant buildings that present a real opportunity for adaptive reuse and infill development, but existing code provisions and permitting procedures, as well as some other barriers are creating challenges for developers. And so we received a lot of feedback of wanting to clarify and streamline processes that can reduce uncertainty and help attract reinvestment. And I know a lot of this work is already underway, but we offer a little bit more clarity from stakeholders we worked with. They're specifically looking for priority neighborhoods in downtown and Empire District and Front Street, and ensuring that they're served by infrastructure for small businesses and other mixed-use developments. So a next step in this case would be to continue engaging with businesses on the barriers that they're facing with permitting, and to proactively work with them to simplify and clarify these processes, as well as exploring some options to leverage TIF dollars to support redevelopment, such as seismic upgrades, HVAC upgrades. There's a lot of really high cost barriers that these folks are facing. So be a little bit longer term. So something we'd recommend starting in year 2 of implementation. And this is something that could be measured by just counting the number of permits that are approved for adaptive reuse. And we see this as something that the city could certainly lead on. The third action here is to identify infrastructure needs specific to these priority development sites. So again, making the connections between infrastructure and economic development and making those shovel-ready sites. And finally, we'll go to goal 4, which is to really uplift a lot of the teamwork and regional collaboration in a more formalized way. So this goal reads to foster strategic partnerships and regional collaboration. The first action is around formalizing some of these partnership frameworks. We have a few examples in the strategy there. The second is around, and I'll detail this one a bit more, around coordinating with regional facilities, specifically the hospital, as well as North Bend Medical Center, Coos Bay Clinic, and some others. Healthcare is increasingly important given the demographics of the city, and the demographic trends that we've seen, as well as the hospital being a source of higher wage jobs to support the city and city services. So this action is all around supporting higher educated professionals and workforce shortages that can ultimately threaten the quality of life in the city, as well as essential services in the city. So next steps for this action would be things like providing these anchor employers with information that support employment recruitment and retention, such as providing a summary of benefits of working and living in Coos Bay, and really marketing the area based on its schools and neighborhoods and community events. And we looked at a program out of Canada actually called Hamilton Newcomer Day. So we've highlighted a best practice of something that can showcase public services and community-based organizations and local amenities when new people are moving into the city. And then finally, to convene regional workforce retention roundtable with HR leaders to really understand their concerns and hiring needs. So just encouraging the city to take a really intentional role in some of these conversations. Again, a little bit longer term wouldn't be something that would start in year one, but would be important nonetheless. And these last two actions, the first is around advocating for state and federal funding to advance on shared priorities. Again, we heard a lot of the same challenges around the region, and there's a lot of opportunity to partner in lobbying for dollars, to bring state dollars to the city, bring federal dollars to the city, and so forth. And finally, continue doing what you're doing on supporting regional partners that are leading on innovation initiatives. The city's already an active partner in those spaces, and we wanted to give credit to that. And so are encouraging the city not to reinvent the wheel on innovation, but to continue supporting that good work. So this is may feel like a lot, which is why we broke this into a year one and subsequent years. The focus is to really ensure that this is in alignment with council's strategy, and year one to establish baseline data in terms of tracking. So not in terms of the demographic data and workforce data and all of that we did for the strategy, but just to establish what will be tracked over time, so that you can quickly see if there's an improvement in one action or another, as well as to establish a really clear governance structure. Again, it's not something Chelsea can do all on her own. And so does that mean continuing to convene the project advisory committee and keeping them engaged and keeping them accountable for supporting this work? And finally, to prioritize actions, and considering staff capacity and funding is going to be really important. Staffing changed in the midst of this project, and so we tried to account for that accordingly. But as things continue to change, as Scott said, the actions and priorities may change, but the vision should remain the same. So in the all the way through year 5, we're recommending to track progress, and then for staff to continue to provide council with updates of what has been done, what is working, what is not, and then adapt as needed. So with that, I will invite Chelsea to speak about what this will look like for a next step, but I'm also happy to answer any questions from the council.
Yeah, so staff has scheduled the development strategic plan to be brought before you at your meeting on September 2nd for consideration, adoption by resolution. That allows us to just move forward, acknowledges the work that's there, and we can begin taking actions set forth in the plan. And like I said, separately, the EOA will go through a legislative land use amendment process, which is a little bit more comprehensive, longer process. So I would expect council would see that again November-ish.
Chelsea, what actions would we take if we pass this? What actions would we take if we pass this at our September 2nd meeting that we aren't already doing already?
I think things like inventorying our land. We have buildable lands, but let's like going out and actually looking at the property buildings that are sitting up vacant for sale. How can we expand upon the inventory that we know, and then really market, like work with property owners, work with SCDC to market those properties and try to get them or connect them with developers or businesses to try to get them used. So maybe something like that would be something that we would further do.
Okay, because we do that now. You're just saying we might evolve into doing more of that? Is
To
that correct?
enhance those actions, that action, yeah. And there's many more in there. You
Okay.
can look at them, yeah.
A lot of this just seems familiar. So, and I appreciate the work that's been done, but I feel like a lot of the things that we're seeing in this are not surprising to me and are things that are actually in our strategic plan already.
Yeah, and I would just add that that was purposeful, because we want to make sure that these two documents align and we're not going in different directions.
Right.
Two very focused plans. So they had access to the draft versions of what we've been working with in the strategic plan, and it's also intended to come to you guys at your next meeting. So there is some overlap, but it makes sense for some of it to overlap.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, counselors?
I'd say it sounds familiar, mostly because this is exactly what we all feel we need to be doing, and this is just the documentation of that for kind of the legal purpose. I think that it's a good outline. Creating that baseline information is, I think, essential, so we know where we're going and we can track that data. It's something that I always have a feeling about, but tracking it and having traceable data is essential. So I just appreciate the work and kind of getting all of our ideas down on paper.
Counselor Kilmer?
I would just add that almost exactly what Counselor Matthews did, but Counselor Stevens was very much in favor of making sure because we were involved in the advisory portion of that did align. But I do see a lot of other things in there that kind of takes it to the next level. And some of the things that, all of that stuff that builds upon what we have
success,
and then gives us direction. So, but yeah, Counselor Stevens was very adamant that we make sure that we weren't on two different
Tracks.
roadways.
Great, thank you. Mayor Benetti, any comments from you?
No, I'm glad that, for this report, and as the other counselors have mentioned, a lot of this we have talked about, and I'm glad to see it in format. It mentions some things that we can try to do to help accomplish this. So I think it's great. And I just look forward to moving forward. I guess my one question is, once we adopt this, Chelsea, or where we're from, Eco Northwest, is there a benefit? I mean, I know we're mandated by state, but will this help us with the state in some way of funding? I mean, that's some of my frustration. We've been up to the legislature. We've asked the state for some help for infrastructure, specifically for some development. Will this document and this plan help us in any fashion? Or, I mean, I know we need to do it, and it's great that we have the format, but is there a benefit besides this that can help us at the next level of the state?
I guess
Go ahead.
and I think, Beth, I saw you come off mute, but I'll just say briefly, anytime you have a plan, it's used to support funding and next steps. And so that's certainly the benefit. For example, an EOA that shows you have a deficit of commercial and industrial lands could be used to support an urban growth boundary amendment. This development strategic plan could be used to support funding to take the next steps in the plan.
Could it help us get funding or support funding for infrastructure, as it's stated here, that infrastructure is needed?
I think it could certainly add value to a request for infrastructure funding to show that the community has invested time and energy and sees that as a need and a value. I guess I can't tell you for sure.
Sure,
that it
I
would.
understand. I'm just looking for tools that can assist us. So
Yep.
it's something that we can definitely use. So thank you.
And the monitoring information that you'll have from this, I think, are helpful in supporting that. So you'll have more ammunition to say, this is what we're doing. And we need to do more of this because of these statewide priorities. And our barrier is infrastructure. So.
I think another tool would be Economic Development Administration dollars. And so having a regional comprehensive economic development strategy is a prerequisite for accessing a lot of their dollars. And this document is in alignment with the region's work. And so this further points to alignment and agreement within the community and prioritizing some of these projects. And so I think exactly what Chelsea said is I would fully agree with, and the EDA is one funding source that would look for a document like this as a prerequisite.
Counselor
I
Kilmer?
was just going to say the very same thing. It's beyond just the city level. We have staff that are involved in organizations and counselors, and I see that Harv was online for a while. It can also help with other opportunities that support economic development in a community through those organizations that we're involved in.
Great. Counselor Cribbins, any comments?
There's a lot going through my head, but it's nothing cogent, so.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you for your honesty.
I think at this point, Christine, did you want to make a public comment now in regards to the proposed plan? No? Yes?
Thank you.
Okay, please, come on up.
I thank you for trying to increase the audible sound. It is always a problem. I think you're in this little bubble here and you can hear better when I listen to things. But thank you, Christine. She made it a little better, but it could definitely be improved. And for you to use your mics all the time too, because it's just difficult. Thank you. I think I attended the first meeting and then I also attended, I submitted one of the surveys, and I applaud planning process. It's so important. But certainly in terms of statewide land use planning, the component of economic development is sort of one of many things, and they're linked to the other items. And so there was a lot of talk about housing in this, and that's goal 10. But I didn't see much talking about estuarine resources and coastal shorelands and those resources that are really important. And I just want to emphasize to you that the Coos Bay Estuary is an important resource for all of us. And there's reference to this in terms of shore, and enjoying the waterfront and all of those things. But there are economic ties to that in terms of what it offers, what it does for us, the habitat that it creates for fish and wildlife, the recreational components of people that are interested in fish and wildlife that are recreating, and the ecosystem entirely that supports fish and wildlife populations and protects us. And one of the aspects that's increasing in understanding economic development is restoration of wetlands and habitat that actually, there's a recent study that I'll share with you offline, obviously, that came out of Virginia that estimated the $90 million worth of economic support is coming from the restoration components. That includes hazard mitigation, which didn't seem to come into your planning at all. You're talking about developing waterfront access, and even talking about development on the Spit, which is all in a tsunami zone. And so I know the city has been very active in some of the hazard mitigation conversations, and I follow your city council and things like that, but they need to be part of this economic opportunity and development, because that's protection for the future. So I just see, when I look at the approach to economy, it seems to be rather narrow and needs to be broadened. And I know you have different initiatives for that. And certainly, I think, aligning and thinking of the other land use components that are all part of that is really important. I won't specifically address some of the comments that were made about the potential development of the PCIP, because that would require some major changes in the estuary and major changes in conflicts that could relate to conflicts in recreation and things. So for some reason, it's like things are getting in the positive end, and I feel that it's missing a little more of the comprehensive part. But I applaud. I think it was a good effort. But if there's a way, and I'll send some comments written about how this might be expanded and made a stronger document, which again would help you in funding opportunities and also just looking at the long term is, you know, what's the sea level elevation going to be? How are you going to do with the waterfront development? How are you preparing for this? There's comments about, you know, use of the floodplain, but there's a lot of gain in terms of restoration and mitigation, and there's good studies out there that show that you can actually help protect all your assets with some of these opportunities. So I don't want to go on further in a lecture, but those are the deficiencies that I see this, and I think there's a potential to connect it to something that is, again, being more and more favorably looked at with real numbers as to how you can protect and enhance your future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christine. Chelsea, was anything that Christine just referenced, was any of that considered? Or is this plan specific to certain land use goals and that's why we chose to go that direction?
Well, I might call on our consultant to speak more to the technical requirements and what was and wasn't considered. But I mean, this is following Goal 9, economic development. We have goals 16 and 17, which deal with estuarine resources and shorelands. We have a Coos Bay estuary management plan that deals with that. Certainly they're connected, but when you're doing these planning efforts, they're not always so intertwined. So maybe I'll call on Beth to speak more to an EOA and the level at which we connect the two.
Certainly. And so what you just said right there, Chelsea, is true. And those things are all considerations. In looking at buildable lands, we first determine what lands are unavailable for development because they're constrained or potentially unavailable for development. And so looking at things like floodplains and riparian considerations, et cetera, what your local protections are. And so that is very much baked into an EOA and represented there. So what you were just talking about are what are the opportunities presented by your by the estuary, that kind of thing, for economic development. And I think those are a little bit implicitly here, but we haven't had a big discussion about say opportunities from the fishing industry or other types of opportunities like that specifically, in part because they just haven't been part of the discussions that we've been having. And as you say, you've got your estuary management plans and other goals related to shoreline areas. So I don't know if that's helpful or if that answers your question. But this wasn't a real in-depth study about the opportunities around those kind of resources. That's not what's typically in an EOA.
Great, thank you, Beth. Appreciate those comments. Any other questions or comments from council?
I would just say that the different planning goals that the state of Oregon has definitely need to be kept in mind as we move forward with all of these different ones, and they are integrally tied in a lot of ways. While this one is more focused on the economic developments, I know that myself personally, I'm keeping goal 16 and goal 8 and goal 7 and goal 5 and goal 6, all of them kind of in the background operating because they have to integrate in with those ones as well. That being said, you know, having the funding available to go through some of these planning goals and create documents like we are for the economic opportunities and economic development would be nice as well. And I know that we are all trying to work in different silos around these goals. So this one just happens to be on the table today, I guess. So we're working. It's all in the background. And I appreciate the comment, Christine.
Well said, Counselor Matthews. I would like to thank Beth and Brittany and Scott for your passion on this project. Scott, you should really just do commercials for our city. But I will point out, it doesn't rain as much as you referenced anymore. So it's much sunnier here now. So I will point that out. But thank you for all of your work. And with that said, if there are no other comments, I will adjourn this meeting. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you.